Welcome back to It's Down to Business with Jack Miller. Call us at 305-541-2350. Follow us on Facebook at Jack Miller Down to Business or on Twitter at HJackMiller1.
You have chances to serve much more than you grab the ring on the merry-go-round.
We have on the line a phenomenal author by the name of Robert Hutchinson. He just came out with a book called Searching for Jesus. I think the guy's written like 12 books, including one, I think, about poker or gambling. We're going to ask him about that. But he is these guys traveled the globe, including, I think it's kind of interesting, Hawaii bureau chief for the Hollywood Reporter. Bob, are you with us?
I'm here. Thanks for having me on, Jack.
My pleasure. I'm really excited. I know how busy you are this time of year, and I'm very excited to have you with us.
Well, it's good to be here.
So, tell me, you just came out with this book, Searching for Jesus. I have a bunch of questions for you, and feel free to interrupt me or whatever. But why did you do or write a book? I don't mean to sound this disrespectful, but it seems that there's been so many books written about Jesus. What makes your book different, and why did you feel compelled to write it?
Well, I say in the book that I've been working on this for 30 or 40 years, which is more or less true, because I was raised a Christian. I was raised in a Catholic household, and I was always fascinated with the details. For some reason, I kind of wanted to know what a denarius was, and what was the Sanhedrin, and all that kind of stuff. And so, all throughout high school and college, I researched this stuff, and that was a time when there was a lot of scientific interest in the historical Jesus, and scholars were trying to figure out who the real Jesus was, allegedly behind the gospel tales. And I was so interested in it, I actually moved to Israel. I studied Hebrew in Israel for 2 years, came back. I got a master's degree in New Testament from an evangelical Christian seminary here in Southern California. And the reason I decided to write this book was that I kept up with it. I wrote articles about research in the historical Jesus for Christianity Today, and I followed all the twists and turns and the different theories and everything. But just in the last about 5 to 10 years, I started to notice that there were a lot of top scholars at major universities that were saying some shocking things that were the opposite of the skeptical theories that I learned in graduate school and growing up. And it just amazed me. And some of these were Jewish scholars at conservative bastions like UC Berkeley. And I thought a lot of the stuff people haven't heard in the pews, and a lot of what you hear in the media are the same century-old theories that they came up with, in the late 19th and early 20th century. And yet a lot of those old theories are being debunked and questioned. So I decided to write a book to kind of gather together some of these recent archaeological discoveries and new directions in New Testament scholarship, and kind of present them on a popular level for ordinary folks.
So what did you discover? What's the new discoveries regarding this?
Basically, what I discovered is that a lot of the Jewish scholars in particular, but also some agnostic and other scholars, were being very critical of the skeptical approach to the New Testament that has dominated for about a century. Basically, in the late 19th and early 20th century, scholars basically thought that a lot of it was just made up, and legendary material and things like that. And in recent years, a lot of these secular scholars have started to really look at things again, and they've discovered they think actually a lot more of it is historical than they previously thought. And an example I like to give of that is the whole notion of a suffering Messiah. For about a century, Christians have been told that the idea of a suffering Messiah was kind of made up by the early Christians as a way to explain the rather embarrassing fact that the Savior of the world was crucified and died as a criminal. And so the idea was that the Jews in the time of Jesus had no concept of a suffering Messiah, of that kind of a idea. They were expecting a military hero. The Messiah was going to redeem Israel and was going to be a military, a political king. And in just the last few years, they uncovered a stone tablet called the Gabriel Revelation that talks about a Messiah who would suffer, die, and maybe even rise again in 3 days. And this was an archaeological confirmation of the idea that some people in that time really were expecting a different kind of Messiah than people had thought. And so that it was possible that the early Christians didn't make all this stuff up, but that it was in the air at the time, and that the Jews in that time were more varied in their outlook than we realize. And that's one of the big things that the Jewish scholars have really pointed out, that you really should speak about Judaisms, plural, at that time, not a normative rabbinic Judaism that developed later and became standard for everybody. There were a lot of weird ideas back at that time, and Jews had very different ideas of how you should be Jewish, and Christianity fit right into that weird mix.
What do you mean by that? Give me some examples.
Well, like the classic idea, another classic thing is that, the notion that the Jews could not have believed Jesus was in any sense divine, however you understand that, because Jews are strict monotheists. And so obviously it was only when Christianity moved out into the pagan Greek world, among pagan Greeks, when they had all these myths of divine, semi-divine humans, or humans who become God and gods who become human. And so obviously this was a pagan idea that that Christianity adopted, and that therefore the early Jews, or the Jewish followers of Jesus, didn't have any of those kinds of ideas, and it was all just made up later. And what Jewish scholars have been pointing out in recent years is, au contraire, there were Jews in that time that had strange ideas about what they call binatarianism, of an older God and a younger God, and the whole figure of the Son of Man in the book of Daniel and so on seems very much the way Christians spoke about Jesus and so on. And so people like Daniel Boyarin at UC Berkeley say that this is a very Jewish idea, that it might be some of the oldest Jewish ideas that in existence. It's just that later, normative Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, eventually said, no, that's not us, and they kind of suppressed those ideas, and then a more what we know of Judaism today eventually evolved, and then people projected that back 6 centuries earlier to the first century and thought that that's how Jews were in the time of Jesus, when it probably wasn't that way. It was probably much more multifaceted, and many different groups with many different strange ideas.
So you have traveled the globe, obviously, and you have a fascinating history. Your books are a wealth of knowledge, even something on gambling, as Jack mentioned, lodged in there, which is, I guess
poker.
It's an outlier, but it's also refreshing. It's good. It's a good take. But I wanted to know, in all of your travels, this is a Christmas show, and I want to talk about Christmas a little bit. Do people seem to celebrate Christmas in a similar way around the world? What's the strangest thing you've seen, as it relates to Christmas around the world in all of your travels?
To be honest, it's one of the strangest things for me, because people do there's incredible traditions in Europe and so on, and I've been to Germany, I live in France and everything, and everybody has different traditions. One of the weirdest things for me living in Israel was just how it is a totally ordinary day. I mean, of course, I knew that intellectually, but when you're actually living in Israel and Christmas comes and it is an ordinary day, it is not observed at all. I mean, there might be maybe a little clip on the news that they're on the Mabat news show or something about that today is Christmas and that kind of took me aback, because I guess I, for the first time, really knew what it was like to be a religious minority, where your customs and observances are just completely off the radar, totally. And it kind of made me realize what Jews must feel like in America when everybody's celebrating Christmas and they don't. And it was very shocking for me to feel that. And so anyway, that was probably the most unusual thing that I experienced. Even though Christians in Israel do celebrate Christmas, obviously, and I even went to a Hebrew language mass in Jerusalem. So,
did you like living in Israel?
I loved it. I love Israel. I love the Hebrew language. I like Israelis. I've always been a big supporter of Israel, and even with all the political stuff, which I hate to get into, but I tend to be on the Israeli side. And even though I sympathize with the Palestinians, and and the Palestinian Christians and so on. I have friends who are Palestinian Christians. I still usually always kind of find myself arguing the Israeli position, or at least giving that 2 cents worth.
Right.
So, yes, I did like it.
I think
I was just there recently, actually.
I think a lot of the Palestinian Christians support a lot of the things that Israel does. I think
Well, you can certainly tell the difference when you're, like in Nazareth, you see a pretty girl with a modest blouse and a skirt and no head covering. You know it's a Christian girl, as opposed to the whole kind of the burqa kind of look.
Right.
So you can always tell the Christian girls in Nazareth when you're there. So yes.
One thing we'd love to ask of all of our guests today: what's your favorite Christmas song, and what's your favorite Christmas movie?
Oh man, the movie's easy. I love this new movie called A Nativity Story with this Maori actress. I thought, well, when I watched it, it just seems really gritty, down to earth. It's very, it retells the nativity and the birth of Jesus in a very gritty sort of way. And I thought, gee, where do they get this actress? Is she Arab? What is she? She's very exotic looking. Turns out she's a Maori from New Zealand. I can't remember her name, but it's called The Nativity Story. As far as my favorite song, it's O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. I don't know the Hebrew resonance of all that, but I've always loved that. I used to play the guitar at a rock folk mass when I was in high school, and then I had a recorder, and I used to play that. It took me months to learn how to do the recorder well enough that I could play O Come, Emmanuel.
we only have about 2 minutes left. What else did you find interesting that would surprise people in your research about searching for Jesus?
That there's a lot of archaeological finds that they've come up with just recently that are reconfirming a lot of the people, places, and beliefs at the time. I mean, it's just amazing the stuff they're digging up. As I think I told you before we were on the air, that they found the ossuary, or the burial box for the high priest Caiaphas, and they may have even found the ossuary of James, called James the Just, who is either the brother or stepbrother or cousin of Jesus. And if that is actually his ossuary or burial box, and scholars disagree and they fight about it, it's very, very contested. But if it was, it's the first archaeological confirmation of the existence of Jesus of Nazareth.
That's pretty cool. It
is very cool. And the other thing, there's some amazing places that they've just discovered a first-century synagogue in Magdala on the Sea of Galilee, and it is an unbelievable find. And Jesus almost certainly preached there. They're pretty confident that he probably preached in the synagogue, and it was standing when he was walking around Galilee. So that's just, they discovered this in 2009.
Magdala, is that named after Mary, or is this
Mary
named
Magdalene? Absolutely. It was called Migdal, which is tower in Hebrew, and it was where they had a international fish export business there. They used to export salted fish all over the Roman Empire.
Those St. Peter fish are so good. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a restaurant right by it, actually, a St. Peter's restaurant right on the Sea of Galilee there.
Delicious up there in the Canary. Yep.
Pretty cool stuff. Well, Bob, I appreciate you being with us. Everyone should check out Robert Hutchinson. He's on, you could Google him. He's all over. There's tons of YouTubes on him. And check out Searching for Jesus on Amazon.
Yes, it's there. Find bookstores everywhere.
And bookstores everywhere. Bob, I want to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on, Jack.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great day, Bob.
We'll be
Take
back
care.
in a few
Bye.
minutes, everyone.
Don't turn that dial. We will be right back.